We have skeleton earrings. We have our pumpkin spice latte from yesterday that I didn't finish. I even have my fall candles lit up right there. In my book, it's the official start of fall. Happy fall. I have seen online that BookTube is back, and I thought I would throw in my 2 cents and give you guys my best horror book recommendations that you can read this fall. I think I should throw in a quick... oh my god, it's raining! It's raining! I love that. When you live in Hawaii, you don't really get many signs of fall, but raining and like the slight deviation in temperature, that 1 degree where instead of 70 it's 69 degrees. I'm so excited. Anyways, my recommendations are exclusively horror. So if you're into like romantic books or non-fiction books. Next, the reading level for the books that I'm going to recommend literally go from like elementary school level to well beyond college level. We've got something for everybody here, so regardless of age, stick around because I got you. Without further interruptions, even though I am sure that there are going to be dozens throughout this video, let's get into it. We'll start from the very tippy top of my list, one of my favorite horror books that I have ever read. And I haven't been reading that many books as of late, but I read this particular book back when I was in high school, which seems like it was a lot longer now. Anyways, Rosemary by Stephen King is going to be my first book recommendation. You really can't go wrong with a classic Stephen King story. He's one of the most renowned authors. If you ask the general public what they think about horror books, or the first person that comes to their mind when they think of horror books, you're either going to get Dean Koontz or Stephen King, and it's uncanny that we have a Stephen King recommendation. We would have more if I didn't give a shit, but I do, so we'll have just one for this video. And I chose Rosemary. Rosemary is one of the most graphic books that I've ever read from start to finish. Disclaimer, sorry, there's a lot of domestic abuse. It deals with loss and pregnancy graphically. I can't stress how graphic it is. The one thing that has stuck with me throughout the years from this book is the introduction. It's heavy from the very beginning, so if you have a weak stomach or a weak heart, if the loss of a pregnancy is something that you hold dear to your heart, don't read this book. At least not right now, not until you feel like you're ready, because it starts off strong with a miscarriage. That's all I'll say. Have you ever seen that movie Safe Haven? It's like Safe Haven, but on crack. This one's definitely not for the kind-hearted. It takes a toll on you. But if you are into horror reads that, you know, make you feel a certain type of way, which I assume is why you're here, go read Rosemary. You will probably not be able to put it down. It's definitely a page turner. I would say Rosemary is like a 10 or 11th grade reading level. You don't need much to understand it. That's recommendation number 1. Now we're moving on to recommendation number 2. Now this horror book is Japanese. It's a manga. It's the same narrative in which in America, if you were to ask someone who comes to mind when you think of horror books, you get Stephen King or Dean Koontz, whatever. In Japan, I'd imagine you would get Junji Ito. This is my second copy of Uzumaki. Uzumaki is a direct translation to spiral or swirl. Basically, this book is about a spiral, I guess, disease type of thing that takes over a town, and there's multiple stories all in this one book. Guys, I gotta tell you, it's hard to explain, but maybe I can just show you like the cover art. There's this page, and then there's this one. Love that. We got like a all-seeing eye here. We have a little twisty romance moment right here. They look like they get along great. Anyways, how do I explain this book? It's really difficult. The way I explain it makes it sound really underwhelming, but I promise you, I pinky swear to you, There's nothing like it, which is why I have such a hard time describing it. It's definitely a very, very good read. It made my imagination stir up things that I never thought I could think of. In terms of like my art, I was extremely inspired after I read this book. I did a lot of spooky things. I think that's a very good quality for a book to have, so it definitely made its way onto my recommendation list. For its art, for its indescribable stories. I could not put this book down when I picked it up, so I want to say that this book was made for children because I read it as a child, but it also gave me extreme trauma as a child that I carried into adulthood. So we're gonna talk about Scary Stories now. Scary Stories by Alvin Schwartz, illustrated by Camel. Let me tell you, he's one hell of an artist. Camel, you gave me nightmares for a decade straight. Thank you for that, Stephen. You might have seen this version of the books, or you might have seen these. They were very popular, maybe like 10 years ago. But all the cool kids read this book when I was in elementary school, so my desire to fit in drew me to this book. Scary Stories Treasury is where we are now, and I know that there was a film adaptation for Scary Stories. It's nothing like the book. And I know you hear that all the time when it comes to movie adaptations and the books, but I mean it this time. The images and stories in this book were made to breed nightmares. As a child, when I first read this book, it terrified the shit out of me. I have a hard time looking at one specific picture in this book, and I'm gonna show it to you guys because I feel like I share that trauma with a lot of other people. It's this bitch right here. It's the whole blank slate yet piercing black eyes and wide smile and the long black hair that everybody knows that's what dead women have. Every ghost of a woman has long black hair. I've had nightmares of that woman ever since I was 12 years old, but this book stuck with me specifically because it made a lasting impression on me. It's a pretty classic book to have read, I feel. I mean, I know a lot of people who've read it, so. Personally, some of the stories are kind of stupid, which is what pushes me to believe that this book was written for children, but at the same time, if you show any child any of the photos in this book, they're gonna cry. I mean, look at the cover, for fuck's sake. Look at her. She's like definitely dehydrated. But there's so much more to it than that. Like, the Scary Stories Treasury is definitely a fun book to have at like sleepovers, especially when you're like a young adult and you want to like spook your friends. You can definitely take some stories from this book and be like, you guys want to hear something fucked up? Because some of these stories really are. It just occurred to me that I don't know how to give good book reviews. If you want to get scared but not like internally scared, more imaginatively scared, you only need like a elementary school level of understanding to be able to read that book. So now we're on to my last book recommendation, and I saved the best for last. We have H.P. Lovecraft, of course. This is H.P. Lovecraft's Great Tales of Horror, and for those of you who don't know, H.P. Lovecraft was actually one of the old authors that inspired Stephen King. H.P. Lovecraft died in like the 1940s, so they're definitely an OG. This book has a collection of H.P. Lovecraft's horror stories, including the Call of Cthulhu and other stories such as the Dunwich Horror, The Rats in the Walls, that's a good one, The Shadow Out of Time. I only read that one once, a long time ago, but I still remember it. I definitely recommend pretty seasoned readers to open this one up because I had a little bit of a hard time using my imagination and understanding what these stories were about, especially because this book is so fucking thick and there's story after story in here, so I was a bit overwhelmed. So if you are a very seasoned reader, don't listen to me. H.P. Lovecraft is regarded to be the best horror author after Edgar Allan Poe, which is our honorable mention only because I don't have a physical copy of any of his books. If you only ever read only one H.P. Lovecraft story and never pick up another book from him again, read the Call of Cthulhu. It's this guy. It's about this guy right here. He's a monster. It takes your idea of thalassophobia and cryptids and all of that fun stuff, and it mashes it all together into one story. I mean, like, what more could you ask for? Ooh, I get excited. I get excited when I talk about it, but I can't say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it. I looked it up and several sources pronounced it Cthulhu, so I can say that with confidence and not sound like a stupid idiot. Unless I totally do, then I just think it's really cool to read the author that inspired one of my favorite authors. H.P. Lovecraft isn't one of my favorite authors, but Stephen King is, and this is where Stephen King's inspiration came from, or at least some of it, and that I think is very cool, which is why I have that book and why I read it. But anyways, we're gonna move on to our honorable mentions. We have 3. This is my first honorable mention right here. We're gonna talk about Silence of the Lambs. I have to say, fantastic book, fantastic movie, fantastic story altogether. The execution and the production of the movie was great, and a very good adaptation, and the book itself was just, it's very much your classic psychological horror. There's murder involved. Love that. I mean, not really, I don't know, fictional murder. Love fictional murder. Hannibal Lecter, he's a horror icon. He's the most renowned cannibal besides Jeffrey Dahmer, like, ever. And he's not even real. Every form of this story that I've seen or read is literally so good. The Silence of the Lambs book, the Silence of the Lambs movie, Hannibal, the TV show, I love all of them. And it's just different versions of the same story, but it doesn't ever get old. It's one of my favorite crime murder books to be written. But then again, as stated before, I don't read that much, so if there are more that are like this that you think I might like, let me know. Our second honorable mention is going to be this one right here, Rosemary's Baby. Now, Rosemary's Baby gained a lot of popularity when it was first written back in like the 1960s. I think it was even considered like the best-selling horror book of the 1960s, if I remember correctly. Basically, this story is, how do I explain it? It has a little bit more like supernatural demons than any of the other books that we've talked about so far, except for some of the stories in Scary Stories. Rosemary's Baby deals directly with supernatural demons, but there's so much more to it than that. I just don't want to give too much away if you have not read it. To be honest, there were some parts of this book where it made me kind of go like, I didn't like that very much. Looking back at it now, I think I was just a little bit sensitive to the matter of what was going on in this book, because there is some parts where this woman Rosemary is asleep and her husband pursues her, but she is asleep. Now that I'm a little more desensitized to it, I'm just like, yeah, you know, okay, it's a book, so. But only for that reason was it hard for me to read at first, but I kind of got over it, and it is a very good book. I can't think of another book like it, and they did make it into a film series, I believe. I've never seen it. My third and last honorable mention is going to be this book right here. We're going to talk about The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. So it doesn't get any more classic than Edgar Allan Poe. He is definitely the starting point for horror books in general. There has not been an author like him before him or after him. Basically, The Raven is about a raven. It's specifically it's a talking raven, which they actually can do. That I realized that ravens actually can talk pretty well in real life, which freaked me out. This poem is about a talking raven. He follows this guy who misses his lover, and basically the man goes crazy. But it's not that long, so definitely look into reading The Raven if you haven't read it yet, because it's kind of a short horror poem, but it's freaking nuts. It's actually pretty sad, but my favorite Edgar Allan Poe story will always be the Telltale Heart. That one was crazy. I actually saw like a video adaptation of it in high school, I think, or middle school, one of those, and I had to read the book after I watched it because I was so confused. I read the book 2 or 3 times before I actually understood what was going on. It's gory, it's a psychological horror. Just like most of Edgar Allan Poe's other books, it's kind of about a crazy person. There's also murder involved, so there you have it. We have 7 book recommendations, 8 technically, Telltale Heart counts, but that is everything that I have for you guys today. So if you have any book recommendations, definitely let me know. I'm open to all genres, not just horror, but horror is definitely my favorite. If it falls under horror, mystery, crime, let me know. That's it for this one. I will see you guys next week, okay? Have a good one. Bye.